Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey guys, welcome to the Team House. This is episode 98. I'm Jack Murphy here with co-host Dave Park. And our guest tonight is Marc Polymeropoulos, coming at us for a second episode. We did episode 67 with Marc, talking about his extensive career in the CIA, deploying to Afghanistan, Iraq, really all over the world. Now we're having him back for round two. We're going to talk about a number of different things, including his new book, Clarity in Crisis. This just came out. It's out in bookstores right now. If you guys want to go and check it out. Marc, thank you so much for joining us again tonight.
It's awesome to be back. I'm sorry I couldn't do it live, with you in New York, but we'll do that next time. But thanks for having me again. I love the show and excited to be here. Show
us what you're drinking tonight. You got something from Greece?
Yeah, so this is in honor of your producer, D. And so it's this little ouzo here.
Okay.
My hometown drink, and it's something with every Greek kid thinks he's drinking milk at 2 or 3 years old, and he grabs a cup from his his dad or mom's from the dinner table, and he takes a swig of it, thinking it's milk, and it's ouzo. So that's your first introduction when you're about 2, and then it just becomes kind of like water.
And what does ouzo taste like for those of us who haven't tried it?
It's black licorice. It's an anise-based drink.
Oh wow!
And there's you have ouzo in Greece. You have arak in the Arab world. You have raki in Turkey, and then you have sambuca in Italy. So it's pretty common, but it's good stuff. And it's you might as well be. I could brush my teeth with it.
And in Serbia, it's like raka, isn't it? It's made out of plums or something like that.
Yep. It's all the same thing. Now, apparently, the legend has it you don't get a hangover from drinking a lot of it, which I can attest is not actually accurate.
Yeah. So. I can too.
Marc, I think let's just kick it off with a brief introduction overview for people who haven't seen episode 67. If you haven't, you should go back and check it out. But briefly, in a couple minutes, could you tell us a little bit about your career in the agency and now retirement?
Sure. So I served for 26 years at CIA. It was, it's pretty scary. The only job I ever had coming out of college. So now I'm retired and I'm doing a lot of writing. So that's been really fun. But I spent 26 years, mostly as an operations officer, as a case officer. I was recruited out of college as an analyst. I spent 2 years as an analyst. And I don't know if I told you this last time. I actually wrote one of the first papers, I co-wrote one of the first papers on the Afghan Arabs and a young financier named Osama bin Laden. That came out in 1993.
Wow.
But then I decided I wanted to become a case officer, and then that kind of launched my career. And I spent, a lot of time living overseas in the Middle East. Maybe almost 3 years in war zones in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. And then I finished up my career, really interesting job, because they took a whole bunch of us in the senior intelligence service. And they put us, working on Russia, because this was, after the 2016 election interference. And they thought that because we had this kind of ethos of kind of covert action and taking it to the enemy in the war zones, we could kind of do this, sort of the same thing when it comes to the Russians, a little bit, obviously, lighter touch, but really pushing back on their malign influence. And so I did that until I retired in July 2019 with some health issues, which I think have been pretty public, but we can talk a little bit about that if you want to.
Yeah, I would, because it's a bit controversial, but I mean fascinating at the same time, that you and members of the State Department, other members of the Central Intelligence Agency, appear to have been hit with some sort of exotic weapon, directed beam weapon. Well, first off, I'd like to hear if any more information about that has come to light. I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions here. Have you heard, or have the doctors been able to gain any deeper understanding of what's really going on here?
Yeah, so I can't recall, how much I got into this last time, because it's taken me a while to kind of come out and talk publicly about it. But I eventually went to Walter Reed's National Intrepid Center of Excellence, which is their traumatic brain injury program. It's very well known in the military, particularly in the special operations world. And when I went there, what was really interesting to me, after having not a lot of luck Certainly not with the CIA doctors who were frankly, not too helpful. But even with my private doctors, but I get to Walter Reed and they immediately diagnosed me with a mild TBI, which if you know TBI, a mild TBI can still be pretty debilitating. And they said it was based on an external exposure event. And so, you're kind of starting to, put pieces together. These are the best doctors in the world on TBI. And then someone from the National Academy of Sciences, Stanford doctor by the name of David Relman, came out with a report and said that that the symptoms of those affected were consistent with a likely directed energy weapon. And so you start putting pieces together, and then finally, even after I retired, there's been a slew of cases, and these are people I know. And so these are CIA officers and some diplomats as well, mostly CIA officers who you have been really severely affected in various parts of the world. And so something bad is happening. And so I think we've moved past the idea or the question of, is this, psychosomatic? Are we all making this up?
Right.
And that's crazy. Right. Now what has happened is still in question. I think time will tell. Eventually we're going to get to the bottom of this. I think, the new CIA director, Bill Burns, is putting a ton of resources into it. He believes us that something happened. And eventually we're going to get to the bottom of it, because in the end, you can't have our personnel, whether it's CIA officers, State Department, or if you listen to, former acting Secretary of Defense Chris Miller, this was happening to DOD as well.
Right.
And so something's going on, and we got to make sure it stops it, because in essence, it's an act of war against our personnel.
Mark, can you tell us what some of the when you say a directed energy weapon, for those of us who don't have any, we know what guns are, grenades, and Carl Gustav's. Yeah. Can you tell us what a directed energy weapon might be? Like, what are the possibilities?
Sure. So I'm not a technical expert, so I'll botch this totally. But it's, so for example, there's technology that today there's U.S. companies that are selling these types of weapons to the U.S. military to take out drones. So it's basically a directed energy weapon which will incapacitate a drone and cause a small drone to drop from the sky. So it's kind of, the idea would be you could redirect that at a human. And we know, there was a document that was declassified. It was FOIA'd, several years ago, because there was an NSA officer who served in Moscow who really has crippling symptoms now. And NSA, admitted in this document that is now unclassified, saying that Russia had such a weapon, a directed energy weapon, to use against personnel, which in essence just incapacitates you. And so, the technical aspects of it, I gotta leave to others. But I think that, there's no doubt that this technology exists. I think it's more of a question of, why, how, and to what extent an adversary would use this.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because strategically, it's interesting that it's debilitating. It's not lethal. Right. So, if they were to assassinate a CIA officer, a State Department, Foreign Service officer, someone like, there's serious international repercussions. But in this case, they're hitting you with something that doesn't kill, but it's debilitating enough that you're taken off the board, so to speak. You're sent home. You're not able to do your job anymore. And so it serves, if this is what's happening, it serves their interest because, look, Mark is not doing counter Russia operations anymore. He's back home in the hospital.
So look, we're stacking up officers getting medical care now. So what does that do? It takes them off the battlefield. So, when you think about it, it's an insidious weapon, but it's pretty, when I say brilliant, that doesn't sound too hot, especially since what happened to me. But we're having a very difficult time, finding attribution. Mm-hmm. Certainly, it's a difficult time countering this, but our people are being incapacitated, and when you have that, it's a pretty brilliant weapon to utilize. And so at some point we're going to find out what happened, just like everything else in life. This is going to come to light. Now, whether it's from, a defector who comes across with the blueprints, or we catch someone in the act, or our technical folks, devise means that we can detect this real time. We'll get to the bottom of this. It's just like, I'm confident of that. But in the meantime, I think that, Director Burns and Secretary of Defense Austin and Secretary of State Blinken, they have a big challenge on their hand because our personnel are getting injured. And, if this wasn't me sitting here and I was watching this, I might sit there kind of with an eyebrow raised. But all I can tell you is people are stacking up at Walter Reed. And when those doctors there believe it, I went in there for PT. It's a really humbling experience to go to Walter Reed because, you go to NICO, the TBI center, then you go across the street to their physical therapy part. And I'm the only one there with a limb. I mean, there's double amputees and double amputees, and I stopped feeling sorry for myself. Mm-hmm. But I was talking to a doc there, and I said, hey, I'm one of the, you guys know what this, I'm one of the OGA guys, the other government agency guys. And she goes, I know all about you. And, and I know your case. And, I've treated a whole bunch of DOD folks with the same thing. And I was like, really? That's kind of interesting. And so it's something that's going to have to be dealt with. I think, thank God for two things. And it's ironic as a CIA officer, I'm saying this. Thank God for the press. I went public on this with GQ, and a whole bunch of other press outlets have really run with this. Whether it's CBS News or New York Times or NBC or Fox or anybody. And it really put a lot of pressure on the government to make sure people got health care. So, the press is called the fourth estate, and coming from a CI officer, it's pretty crazy to say it, but they've been, the press has been amazingly helpful in really helping people who were hurting.
Were you not, prior to the press getting involved, were you not getting the attention that you needed?
Oh yeah, no. So I was begging for health care. I had a splitting headache, and it wasn't going away, and I was like, just get me to. First I wanted to get any kind of health care, and the agency rejected that. Then, excuse me, after I went public, it was to get me to Walter Reed because they had started sending people there in ones, in just single digits. And still there was a reluctance. And so, look, there's a long, sordid history, whether it's Agent Orange or Gulf War syndrome, or even going to like the NFL with CTE, with head injuries. Right. It takes organizations a long time to get to the right place. Yeah. Right. Eventually they do. But it just took, a lot of pressure to do it. And I tell you, I go down the Hill and I will meet with the staff or the members, such as, Senator Warner and Senator Rubio. That's two different sides, of the aisle on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And then I go meet with the staffs of Adam Schiff and Devin Nunes. Do you think they agree on anything in life? They actually do on this one issue. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. And so, they're really passionate about people trying to get cared for, because look, they have access to all the classified information. I do not anymore, but they want to see people getting the health care they deserve.
It's it's awesome that that happened, and it felt like for a little while they were throwing all you guys to the wolves, and they were kind of treating it the way our government treated Agent Orange, Gulf War syndrome, things like this, even PTSD and TBI itself to some extent, pretending these things aren't really happening, when they are, and when you're not treating it, it gets worse and worse and worse. Once you did get to Walter Reed, could you tell us about what the TBI clinic is like, what that treatment is, what the process is that you have gone through?
Sure. So, this is it's an emotional subject for me because they saved me, and I could talk about this for hours, but I'll say a couple things. First, you go there and you don't feel alone, and so traumatic brain injury is something that the military has come to terms with, but NICO has seen this, in the 2 decades of this kind of never-ending war. And so you go there, and it's this integrated, 1-month program called the Intensive Outpatient Program, where for 10 hours a day you see 18 different specialists. You go there with a cohort with several people with you. I was there with someone from from Naval Special Warfare, Naval EOD, and then Air Force with a combat controller from AFSOC, and you're there for a month together, and you see everyone from. Obviously, you get imaging, MRIs and CT scans, but you also do a lot of alternative therapy. And that, to me, and that's where they're brilliant, and that's what really worked. It's art therapy, it's meditation, it's yoga, it's nutrition. It was total wellness training, and it was pretty incredible. And so people, if people who know me would be like, "Are you kidding me? Like you're sitting around doing yoga and deep breathing?" Well, I'll tell you one thing, that has actually been embraced by the special operations community much more than people would think, because it works. Uh-huh. And so I left there with two things. I left there probably feeling 20% better. The sleep study part is a huge thing. 50% of TBI victims develop sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is a deadly condition, but that's 50% of TBI victims. So I have this, I look like a B-1 pilot. I sleep now with this machine called a CPAP. I felt amazingly better after that. So I walked out of there feeling about 20% better, but it also gave me two things, which is, is tools and hope, because they believe you. And I still go back now, as I was telling you guys, kind of in the pregame session, I went there for some acupuncture treatment today. I mean, the U.S. military has developed incredible acupuncture techniques that, the guy I get acupuncture for has done this in MRAPs in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so, he calls it battlefield acupuncture. And so there's ways to ultimately, because they want you to feel better. And so, when you go to a place every day, they ask you, did you want to hurt yourself last night? And in my case, that was not the case, but that's the level of seriousness of that institution. And, God bless those the men and women there. I have enormous respect for them. I've talked about it really openly. Who would have thought that I turned into, after a 26-year career at CIA, I turned into a big time, advocate of this alternative, wellness training, but it works. Yeah. And I really believe in it.
I wonder if there's a combat acupuncture badge and what the qualifications
there should
be.
You know what? You guys might have seen this before. So they were doing these staples in my ears.
Oh, really?
And that's apparently very common that they've done this. Because I ran into someone who was a Force Recon Marine, and he said he walked out one day and he saw these guys with this glittery stuff in their ear. But it's all based on chronic pain. The relief of chronic pain. And I'll tell you that the one thing is, after 2 decades of this, there's a lot of people who are broken.
Yeah.
And so, it's a really serious issue. And so, God bless the folks at Walter Reed. I have nothing but respect for them.
On that note, Mark, you recently penned this op-ed. I think it was today, actually. I read in the Washington Times about a recently retired SEAL who took his own life. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that article and sort of what happens when guys don't get some of the treatment that they really need.
Sure. So I got to say, it was the Washington Examiner. So
thank you.
I don't want to get in trouble for that, but no. So the article was about an individual named Bill Mulder, and Bill Mulder was a member of SEAL Team 6. He had served for 2 decades, and 127 days after he separated and retired, he took his own life. And I found the story, pretty dramatic. And he had actually gone to NICO as well. He had gone to the TBI Center, and so I did, in this kind of new journey I'm on and doing some writing. I ended up talking to Bill's widow, Sydney, and Bill's brother-in-law, William Negley. And it was an incredible, really, heart-wrenching story, because there actually was care for him at NICO, and he did it for a little bit, but then he chose not to. And Sydney kind of then talked to me about his how he was, kind of crumbling in front of her eyes. Ironically enough, and I didn't even realize it until after I wrote the article, I had actually worked with Bill Mulder in the past. And so, now I kind of think back and I remember him. But one of the things that was most remarkable about kind of this whole issue is that Bill Mulder's, a brother-in-law, this guy, William Negley, then founded, or even before he was killed, he founded a company called Sound Off. And Sound Off, in essence, it's an application on your phone, because the whole premise is that not only veterans, but active duty as well, or even intelligence officers, need a way to communicate with a mental health care professional or a buddy. They need to do it anonymously because of the stigma. And there's an enormous stigma in this crazy type A, alpha male, female, whatever world that we all live in. If there's an invisible wound, you can't take a knee. There's no gunshot. And so William Negley founded this app called Sound Off, and I was really taken by it. He actually has gone and he's ran this by all the SOF foundations, the Special Operations Foundations, and they've kind of bought, not physically, not monetarily, but they've bought into it, because ultimately you need kind of that a mechanism in which someone in need is going to try to get healthcare. There's all sorts, 17 veterans, commit suicide every day. That's a horrific number. I think 43% of the, post 9/11, veterans actually have PTSD, or those that have PTSD, they don't get treated for it. So we got to get people the help they need. And so, I wrote this story to honor Bill Mulder. Perhaps his finest contribution in his death will be that, there's a tool that people can use, certainly in the veterans community, but also in the intelligence community, that's going to help them out. And so these are the things that I'm really passionate about. Thank you for raising it. I really appreciate that.
Can you, for people who might be interested, is it available in the various app stores?
Yeah, it's Sound Off. And so I think, I'll get you more on that too. And maybe we can kind of tweet it out, because I know it was launched in Texas. That's where William Negley is from. But I know that they're expanding their technology, and it is live right now. So if you go online, you Google Sound Off, you'll find that application.
I thought that one part of the article that it mentions that this SEAL Team 6 operator felt like he couldn't go and get help because he'd be kicked off the teams. I mean, obviously being a SEAL is like the most important thing to this dude's life. He invested everything in it, understandably. And the fear, of course, is you're going to get kicked off your team. if you go and try to get help. I worked on a story about a Delta Force operator, Billy Levine. He had his own demons. He shot and killed his best friend. A couple years later, he himself was murdered, apparently, on Fort Bragg, still under investigation.
Amazing story, I know, yeah.
He made comments to Mark Leshikar's sister, his buddy's sister, about how many guys didn't come out directly and say it, but about how many guys in the unit are hurting and need help, but they can't get it, or they feel that they can't get it because they will be kicked off of their team. And this is a real problem that we have with our most elite guys.
So, Jack, you're 100% right. So Sydney told me that her husband told her, like, if you report me that I'm hurting so much, I'm going to get shit canned from the command. That's the exact quote.
Right.
And what's so interesting in this kind of new world that I'm in now, advocating for healthcare, I actually have gotten to know and be friends with the former command psychologist at SEAL Team 6. And so I've had this incredible conversations with her because I was so interested in how we could help the intelligence community as well. But this is a really serious issue. And I'll tell you that, whether you're a Green Beret or a Navy SEAL or a CIA officer, if you don't have a visible wound, it's pretty tough to take a knee when your brothers and sisters are out there doing stuff. And I'll leave you with a pretty amazing vignette. So in Walter Reed, you do something. It's called art therapy, and this is something that everybody embraces. There's a wall at NICO for SEAL Team 6. There's a wall for Delta. There's a wall for AFSOC for the different combat controller elements, and then now there's a CIA wall because so many of us are going there. But one of my colleagues from the agency, he's current active, he's a senior intelligence service officer. He's a very senior guy, and he has been hit by this directed energy issue much worse than me, and he's in some pain. He put this painting together. It's a black canvas. It's huge. It's probably 6 feet by 6 feet. It's just pure black. And then he took some paint and he just threw it on the canvas, and it looks like a splatter. And he called it the gunshot because that's what he said he felt. That he wished we all had. We wished we had a visible wound, and that's what TBI is all about. Whether you're a U.S. military veteran or an agency officer, and so because then people would believe you. Uh-huh. All right, hey, Mark got shot. He's right. He's got to retire. That's fine. Right. Not Mark got hit by some kind of screwed up wacky weapon. He's probably making it up to get disability. And I'll tell you a little inside baseball here for you and all the viewers is that painting, the gunshot, has been seen by the CIA director, and it's been seen by White House officials as well because it was so poignant. And they came to Walter Reed and they saw that, and that was really important. I think that started the trend of saying, okay, we have a problem here. Like, this is not, something really is going on. Because if you meet a victim or if you see kind of the stuff they do in art therapy, you have a little bit of a different view.
Mark, I'm really curious to know a little bit more about this dynamic as it applies to CIA officers. Because, of course, we do have CIA officers who are in combat in combat zones around the world. Right. But also, I have to imagine that there's a certain, maybe a different type of post-traumatic stress that can develop. People operating in high-pressure environments in places like Moscow, Beijing. I don't know, but you know better than I do, Mark, the kind of pressure that builds up in someone who has to work in an environment like that.
Sure. So, I came back from one posting, which was and I can't, obviously, I apologize. It was in the Middle East. It was one of our critical counterintelligence environments. I was there for almost 3 years, and I developed, high blood pressure, like 170 over 100. And the doctors were like, "What the hell? Where have you been?" And I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. Because you are under that pressure, but look, there's no doubt, you sound a lot like, so we see all sorts of therapists at Walter Reed, whether it's art therapists or even the folks who do the acupuncture are actually psychiatrists. And so, I love telling them that, look, hey, I'm not like one of, I don't have this kind of intense 20-year combat experience. I spent some time in Afghanistan, Iraq, certainly, one of our protective officers has an intelligence star for saving my life in Iraq. And so certainly there were times where my life was at risk, but I said, it wasn't that bad. And the psychiatrists are like, sit down, Mark. Actually, it was. Because the one thing about a CIA officer, it's actually pretty interesting when you kind of peel away the onion, is we work alone all the time. So as an operations officer, my job is to spot, assess, develop, recruit, and handle. an agent. And when you do that in some of the denied area environments, or in a place where, the sanction for getting caught is the death of an agent, that's an enormous responsibility you have.
Right.
And so, for me over the years, it was, and I talk a lot about this in the book, about dealing with adversity. I lost agents. These were people who trusted their life to me, and I made mistakes, or they made mistakes, or, fate kind of hit us, and they died. And so cumulatively over the years, after 26 years, I think I'm fine. But when I sit down and I talk to, the psychiatrist at Walter Reed, I think that they love me because I think they could like sit with me for like several years. Like I'm a great project of theirs, because you're exactly right. It's not a combat veteran of multiple tours have been shot at. It's someone who's dealt with a lot different pressures. I have my injury from these mysterious directed energy attacks, but there's a lot of other stuff I dealt with over the years, including deaths of officers that I led, deaths of agents, and just kind of the pressure of kind of running these operations. And so I think you're right. I think it's a different kind of pressure, but it's also something it's never talked about.
Yeah.
I sent. Let me tell you one quick. I sent that article to one of the senior most operations officials at the CIA the other day, and his response was, "Hey, maybe we should kind of take a look at this. Maybe we got a problem." And I was like, "Yeah, good. That's the right answer."
I think it's interesting because I think that people often equate post-traumatic stress with shell shock, right? And the idea of there was a traumatic event, my best friend died in my arms or whatever, there was a traumatic event. And, like a shrink at the VA told me, like, trauma is trauma. And sometimes trauma can be this low-grade trauma, it's like having one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake for an extended period of time that just wears your adrenals, just wears you down. It doesn't have to be a single significant event that causes like these night terrors or
right, Dave, you're 100% right. And it's funny because the psychiatrist today, he told me, he said, look, he actually wasn't happy with me. He goes, you wrote this article, kind of, trying to honor the legacy of Bill Mulder and the 4-year anniversary of his passing. You wrote your book, and he's like, but you were doing nothing to take care of yourself, because their contention is, there's a lot going on, in me after all these years. Because you sit down with mental health professionals, and you kind of they want to know about you, so you tell them everything, and they want to talk about my parents divorced when I was 10,
right,
and then losing an officer in Afghanistan, and then losing an agent in Iraq, and having a car bomb hit embassy in the Middle East, and me and my whole family almost, like, there's so much stuff that's happened over the years, and then including kind of the what I call the moral injury of when I came out and kind of pleaded for healthcare. The agency really kind of shunned me for a while. Now they're not now.
Right.
Director Burns has taken a much different tack, but there's a lot of kind of shit that's gone on in my head. And so I agree with you. Trauma can manifest itself in a lot of different situations. So even the stuff I'm doing now in retirement, they're like, you've got to stop.
Right.
Next week, I'm going down to the Outer Banks. I'm taking my son and a whole bunch of his college buddies. I'm the chaperone. So I'm doing nothing. I'm tuning out, no media stuff, no book stuff. And I'll have 4 days of trying to have them not burn the house down.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. And it's like you said, well, I didn't do what these guys did or whatever. And even, on the civilian side, like sometimes I've had like my civilian friends tell me one time, yeah, I have post-traumatic stress, but I don't want to tell you about it because you were in the military all these years. I'm like, look, post-traumatic stress is post-traumatic stress. Like it doesn't have a requirement as to how you got it or there's no glorious way to get it. There's.
So let me, if you don't mind, I love telling stories.
Yeah, please.
I think you're the viewers like it as well. So here's a great example. So I came back from Iraq, and I think I maybe told you this story before. I went in with Naval Special Warfare into Baghdad for the HVT hunt. So we're rounding up the deck of 55. We're running and gunning every night. I don't even remember. I didn't shower for 6 weeks. And then finally we're done, and I come out of there. But I'd seen a lot of bad stuff, dead bodies and disemboweled. It was terrible, and when I got home after 6 months there, I started having just like horrendous nightmares. I was seeing, dead people. Like it was there was no doubt it was PTSD. I go to the agency shrinks, for my kind of, reintegration thing, and someone's sitting behind a keyboard. How you feeling? What do I say? I'm good.
Yeah.
You have any? No, I'm good. And they cleared right away. So I'm cleared to go right back in. Yet at home, my wife thinks is scared. I'm gonna do something crazy in the middle of the night. And so, it's a perfect example of, as a CIA case officer, I wasn't the trigger puller on stuff. I was running agents that led to HVT takedowns, but I also saw a lot of bad stuff, and clearly that messed me up. And so, it's what you see, not even what you actually do. You can have PTSD from seeing a terrible car accident,
right?
As a civilian, and so
right,
that's really stuck by me a lot, in years later. And look, I remember seeing studies. People kind of mocked it. There is PTSD amongst drone pilots and sensor operators.
Yep.
And so people, my Air Force buddies. I have a great buddy who's a B-1 pilot. He's like, I'm like, well, hold on a second. So this is real. These people are actually really suffering. And so, again, it comes in all different forms.
Yeah, no, I'm probably one of the first people that would have laughed at the whole notion of a drone operator having PTSD. But now having talked to many of them, like, I get it. Like, they're watching people and dropping bombs on them, and then watching the aftermath, the body parts, and it's horrible. It's horrible shit.
And it's funny you say that. One of my good buddies is a former. He's a F-16 pilot. Then he flew he flew Reapers, MQ-9s, and he's retired now. He called me. He's out in the Midwest, and he bought this giant ranch, and he's really happy with his family. And I think he doesn't miss any of that stuff. He's kind of come to peace with a lot of things. But you can't don't mock anyone if who says they're having some issues with PTSD. It can come in all forms.
Right.
We got a couple questions here. Mark, can Mark explain the difference between ground branch contractors and Blue Badger PMOOs? Additionally, how competitive is it to become the latter? Is the recruitment pool mostly limited to former JSOC operators?
Great question. So first of all, I was a regular case officer. I wasn't a paramilitary case officer. I did, work with my kind of, my special activities, brethren all over the world. And I was a base chief, and I ran a paramilitary base. Very often you see that they'll take a kind of more senior, a case officer run the PM base. But the difference is a paramilitary, officer it's a CIA staff officer. They've come into the agency. They will have gone through, what we call the farm. So they have case officer training. Some of the contractors are a little different. Sometimes they're taken from the special operations world, and so and they don't have the same skills as a case officer would. It doesn't diminish anything. In fact, out of the 137 stars on the wall, there's a lot of PMOOs on there. PMOO contractors on there, and so God bless them. They were great friends of mine. One of the great things about the contract cadre is I'd see them all over the world and keep running into them. And they are kind of the backbone of some of our special activities, operations. In terms of getting, recruited into the PMOO world as a staff officer, look, that's a bit of a misnomer that you have to come from the special operations world. There's a lot of there is certainly conventional Army and Marines as well who go there, and I think obviously you have to have some some unique skills, but the other part too is that what CIA is always looking for is having this a different take on the world, and so you come into the organization and look, you want to live and work overseas, but a lot of times we're going to ask you to learn a language. A lot of times and even the PMOOs will do sometimes regular kind of case officer assignments, and so it's this kind of wanderlust, it's this desire to be interested in other languages and cultures. So you don't have to necessarily come from the special operations community. Some of them do. Clearly on the contractor side, a lot of them do. But I know a lot of them who do not as well. And so, it's, if folks are interested in it, it's a heck of a job. I think, one of the things that this is not to dissuade anybody from being interested in this, but, I sent that Washington Examiner article today to some former senior officers of CIA, and their immediate response, because we're talking about the Navy SEAL community, their immediate response is, hey, how are we doing this kind of stuff, like taking care of ground branch? because it's been 20 years of the same kind of incessant, never-ending deployments. And like, I love these. I love these guys. I get calls all the time. There's a local watering hole here called the Vienna Inn, a dive bar in Virginia, and I meet them all the time when they come through. But I think we got to take a really strong look at kind of mental health situation of some of our ground branch officers and contractors as well, who, it's a relentless pace for 2 decades.
D, what's up first? Oh, okay. So, Mark, when you first went to the CIA and said, "Hey, man, I got this health problem. I need to get treatment," would you say that their response was rather flaccid?
Yes.
So would I, and we have something to help with that. Dave, what do you got for us?
Hey guys, so COVID's been a bitch, right? I mean, COVID really has. It's been horrible. It's been a long couple of years, but hey, things are opening up. Spring has sprung, and it's time to get sprung. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Blue Chew's tablets help men achieve harder, stronger erections to combat, and we all like combat, all forms of ED.
Like a baby's arm with an apple in its fist.
Standing at attention. Present arms, right? I guess we would call it. Blue Chew is an online prescription service, so no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. And it ships right to your door in a discreet package, so your neighbors aren't.
Your neighbors don't know what the deal is.
Your neighbors aren't going to be stealing it off your porch, in order to The process is simple. Sign up at bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online. And who doesn't want to do everything online now? Honestly.
True story. And there's a promo code, if you go there, use the promo code TEAMHOUSE to get your first month free.
Yeah, first month free. And you'll get screened, I believe, by one of their medical professionals.
That's pretty baller, you could say.
Yeah. So, guys, if you want a little help in the bedroom,
there's no shame, kings.
Your thing. So, and honestly, I mean, with all of sort of the post-traumatic stress, and I'm not saying Blue Chew is a treatment for anything except for, ED, but with all these things and your cortisol levels rising and stress, increasing, like sometimes that does have an effect on a guy's physical performance. Yeah. And then having an effect on his physical performance can also kind of start to affect his confidence even more. And it can be this cycle. So, sometimes things like this are a good preventative medicine in their own way. Not saying that Blue Chew is, just saying that sometimes we can all use the help.
All right, so we got some more questions here.
How do I follow that up?
Say again?
Yeah, I know. It's a hard act to follow, Mark. I'm sorry, man.
All right, let's go.
Another GB question. From your perspective, how did GB differ from other soft SMUs in terms of missions, culture, capabilities? Are they really as elite as they're made out to be, like more elite than SEAL Team 6 or Delta?
Oh, God. How do I answer that question? Look,
they're putting you on the spot.
Right. Every one of these, organizations is certainly different. So, and I got to be careful in terms of kind of, exceeding my brief here, but ultimately, look, the USIC for the CIA's paramilitary capability is a intelligence gathering function. So just, you have to really understand that it's not a direct action function. So, we are not SEAL Team 6, or the agency's units are not SEAL Team 6. They're not Delta. And so ultimately at the end of the day, what the paramilitary capabilities of the CIA, need to be, should be, and are be. It is a forward deployed unit that in a combat zone can collect intelligence. And so never forget that the primary goal of the special activities officers of the CIA is to collect intelligence. It's not to kick down doors. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's kind of the best way to differentiate between the units that you see all sorts of of lore about, the direct action units, and what CIA does, and it's pretty important to understand that. And within the agency, it's very obvious.
Mark, you are a Greek American, as is our producer D. Now, listen, I'm not going to get into. So I want to stir up a bunch of ethnic controversy, but certain people are known to have problems with body hair issues, maybe a little bit excessive, more than they intended to have. And that brings us to the other sponsor for tonight's show, Manscaped. You guys want to take a look at this here? Dave, you want to show off the trimmer?
Yeah. And actually, let me read a little bit of their copy real quick. Mark, do you mind if we talk about body hair for a second?
Sorry, this is the man show. This is the man show here. We're talking about balls and wieners. We want to make sure you guys are taken care of.
So, guys, our other sponsor, like Jack said, is Manscaped. And we've talked about Manscaped before. Mm-hmm. I use it. I like it. I like it a lot. Because anybody who has tried to trim their nether regions before has probably run into an accident.
A bleeder.
But that doesn't happen with Manscaped. So summer's coming. Are you ready to unveil your beach bod? Or your dad bod, I guess. You're in luck. Our friends at Manscaped just launched their 4th generation performance package, which includes a lawnmower 4.0. Oh, so that's...
It's like this. This is the 3.0. The new one is the 4.0. That's what you'll get when you go and order today.
Yeah, I've been using 3.0, but it's good. Yeah, they sent us these really nice packages, which are fantastic. Because in addition to the trimmer, you get this amazing Reviver ball toner.
Ball toner?
Yes.
Wow.
And
this is the ball deodorant.
Because nobody likes sweaty balls. Nobody likes stinky balls. So they got their 4.0. It's time to bundle it with Manscaped Performance Package 4.0. Sure. Inside this package, you'll find their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose trimmer. Oh, that sounds good. I don't have that, and I need it, man. Are you guys getting the nose hairs?
Yeah, man, it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah,
I'm getting older.
Yeah, I do. Crop Reviver toner, performance boxer briefs, and a travel bag. And the travel bag's pretty nice. Do we have that in there?
This little guy right here.
No, it's down here actually.
Oh my gosh.
It's a
Oh yeah, look at that. That's like a whole shave kit looking bag. Yeah.
So anyway, so they have a lot of really nice stuff in here, but it's waterproof, guys, and it has a little LED on it so you can see where the area that you're working. And it has a kind of protector so you don't get those nicks and cuts when you're shaving those sensitive areas.
The jewels.
So don't make your partner be an expert in jungle warfare. Yeah. And go to manscaped.com and use our exclusive code TEAM20 to get, is it 20% off? 20% off. Anyway, it's...
Balls and wieners, we got you covered.
Yeah.
Mark, another hard act to follow. I'm sorry, man.
Sorry, Mark.
Okay, Mark, another question for you. You mentioned last time you worked with FBI HRT, was wondering what you made of them as operators and how well do they work in an OGA environment?
So, it's a great question. So FBI HRT, for reasons I don't know, and it doesn't really matter, did deploy to Iraq and Afghanistan. I don't know if they were trying to just, get in the fight or get some experience, but and there were reasons, of course, to go into Iraq because we certainly were looking for example, the files of the Iraqi intelligence service, and so there were specific locations we were going to. But the HRT folks I worked with were fantastic. Super dedicated. In terms of their capabilities are as good as any. I think that for me, one of the most interesting things was, look, I'll never forget, we were, and maybe some people who are listening or watching will remember, this was in, I think it was March or April of 2003. There was a massive sandstorm, and we were stuck in it was a JSOC base in Saudi, but everything was kind of socked in, and so I was 2 or 3 days in a tent, so I was stuck with these FBI HRT guys. And so what do you think I asked them? Hey, tell me about Waco. Like, tell me about all this stuff that I've heard. And so, why not? And so it was really interesting for me to kind of just, get a sense of some, what their view on some of the controversial things that had happened in the past. But, there's no doubt that they're technically incredibly proficient. They worked well with us. They integrated in with our teams. They integrated in with the JSOC folks. I didn't see them ever, engage in any kind of combat missions. It was certainly more of trying to go after things like, the files of the Iraqi intelligence service which I think we were always looking for. For example, their files where what U.S. agents they had recruited.
Yeah.
So that was why FBI was kind of with us. And kind of to this day now, I have some friends who have retired from there, but my view of kind of their active duty folks, I'm not familiar anymore.
Well, Mark, if you want to know more about Waco and Ruby Ridge, check us out next week.
Oh yeah, Danny Coulson is basically the founder of FBI HRT. We're going to have him on next week.
Yeah, he'll be on next week to talk about those two issues.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and it's I think that for better or worse, I don't know if that helped or tarnished their image, but these are incredible professionals.
Yeah,
I'll tell you one thing: if someone if one of the bad guys in my past comes to my house and somehow has got me and my family locked up here, that's who I want to come save me.
Yeah,
and they're down the road in Quantico, so I would have no problem with them, kind of being the QRF for me. That's for sure.
That's awesome.
Quick question from Andrew: ask Mark if he is a pirate enthusiast.
Okay, so the pirate right behind me, right there. What an awesome question. I made that mask. No, this is that. Now we're going to get serious. I made that mask in art therapy, and that signified art therapy at NICO at Walter Reed. That signified all of us from the CIA who had battled the agency's medical staff and senior staff to get treatment, and we were this kind of rogue band of brothers. So I made that mask.
I gotcha. That's awesome.
It's meaningful. And because in essence, I'm not going to say that we won because that's silly. All we were trying to do is get healthcare, but that was really meaningful. So that's why that little guy is in the back right there.
Mark, I know you don't want to project onto people that you may not know their actual intentions, but did you get a sense of why it was being shut down? Like the whole idea.
So what a great question, because so ultimately, if there's a lot of people in the media, and I don't want to get into the kind of fight between the right and the left or anything like that, but there's some people in the media who want me to say, so ultimately we didn't want to, to attribute this to the Russians because the CIA director didn't want to go to Trump, who is a Russian sympathizer. And I said, I don't think it never even went that far.
Right.
This was just basic incompetence by our senior medical staff and some senior officials at CIA who fundamentally kind of broke the trust. So look, I had this amazing career at CIA. I think I was involved, like many others. I'm no different than the heroes that I serve with, but I was involved in every covert action program in the Middle East. Every time some bad shit happened, I raised my hand and I went. But I always did so with understanding there's a pact that if I got jammed up, someone's going to help me.
Right.
Period. And that means medical care.
Right.
And so and they just fundamentally failed in that. And that to me is pretty egregious. And so so the senior medical staff at CIA, are they there to help our institution, or are they there to treat patients? And I'm not so sure what the answer is.
Right.
And so I don't go down kind of that political rat hole. It's going to get it's not going to get anybody anywhere. I think it's just and look, it's the government, and God bless, the CIA is an indispensable national security institution, but it's still the government. And so I think this goes down to kind of basic government incompetence that was unable to deal with people who were injured with this kind of silent wound.
Right. That's interesting. Did you ever get a sense if it was happening sort of at the provider level, at the chief medical officer level?
It went to the senior level. No, so here's the amazing thing about it. The junior doctors in our Office of Medical Services were amazing, and they looked on in horror what they were seeing when I was like, please, for fuck's sake, get me to healthcare.
Right.
And the answer was no. And literally people at senior levels were saying things like, you're making it up for workers' comp. Workers' comp. I retired in the senior intelligence service.
Right.
I can't get workers' comp.
Right.
It'll screw everything up in my life. And so, or that I'm trying to do this to get publicity. And like, I was hurting.
Right.
And so, that's the thing that is kind of so I think
it's a stab in the back.
This
yeah.
is going to show a fundamental leadership failure, because these people were not leaders. Now, you two, if someone came to you and said, hey, someone who's working for you is hurting, you're not going to say, like, okay, if you're a police officer, or I'm sorry, if you're in a car accident and you're going, okay, so my people are in a car accident, I got to get them to the hospital, but let's wait for the police investigation to see who's at fault. Like, nobody does that.
Right.
Get them to the hospital.
Right.
And so it it's the same question that people ask me all the time. Why did the CIA bungle this so much? I don't know the answer. Right. And it's either, it's basic incompetence. Perhaps they're worried about liability as well. Mm-hmm. But what I did, I hired a lawyer. I hired a lawyer very specifically, and I paid my lawyer money with a simple instruction that was communicated to the CIA: get me to Walter Reed. I'm not going to sue the agency for anything. I don't care. We socked away a lot of money. I was in the senior intelligence service. My wife was in the senior executive service of the government. She's got a private sector job. I don't need anything. Just get me to Walter Reed. I have no interest in anything else. But they kept, they thought otherwise, and so that was really disheartening. I mean, I'm pretty open about kind of my struggles with this, and it caused me tremendous anxiety because I just couldn't understand why they wouldn't just do the right thing.
Right.
Tim just wanted to say much respect and thank you for your service, all of you. And before we get on to any other questions, I just want to take a moment to ask you, Mark, your new book here, Clarity in Crisis, that's just out. Can you tell us about the book, what it's about, how this came about? Why did you write it?
So this is my baby now, and so it was an amazing journey. It was kind of this cathartic experience. Because of the headaches that I suffered, after the events in Moscow. I was able to, after retiring, I could work 2 or 3 hours a day. But if you're writing a book, that's perfect. Mm-hmm. And so here's what. So by the end of my CIA career, and after a ton of kind of failure and kind of dealing with a lot of humility, and I realized that I was actually a pretty good leader, but it took a long time to get there. And so one of the things I thought about is, what are some of these leadership principles that allowed me to succeed, and most importantly, and the reason why the book's called Clarity in Crisis, it's how to succeed in times of ambiguity. Mm-hmm. You want to be the one, to deal with situations where there's a lack of situational awareness. You want to be that person there to kind of live in the gray, and a lot of people are not comfortable about mm-hmm. that. And so what I thought about were, I thought about 9 principles, 9 key things I did, which in essence was building a team. And not only building a team, but also, mentoring and teaching officers under me, teaching them about things like, how to deal with adversity or fostering competition, that ultimately when kind of the shit hits the fan, you're sitting there and you're in your happy place. And I really remember being in that by the end of my career where I really could handle those situations, in fine fashion. So, I decided to write a book about it because I thought 2 things. One, it would be really interesting kind of, for the American people, even for the private sector, to see how we did this. And number 2 is it's also kind of an homage to the agency and just, to the profession of intelligence operations. Despite kind of the agency, the medical staff and the senior officials not treating me so well, it's still an institution that I love. If you talk about my shrinks at Walter Reed, think that's there's something off on that, but it still is true. So I wrote this book, and it's getting a lot of some really, really positive reviews, because I think a lot of people are going to enjoy not only the war stories, but also what I'm trying to teach.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited about it.
And I mean, you were in some really challenging locations.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talked about that on the last show, some of the places that you were at. I think people in general don't like ambiguity, and they want a certain amount, a certain amount of certainty. And if they can't have that certainty in the situation, then maybe they start micromanaging more so that they feel control even when they don't have it. And so you address that.
Yeah, so that's the amazing thing. When you build the kind of correct type of team and you teach these leadership principles, you actually micromanage much less. And so there's so many different principles we can talk about. We have some time tonight, but one of my principles I talked about was being a people developer. Now it sounds really kind of it's commonplace, but it's really important. And I'll give you the exact example on why. So I'm a base chief in Eastern Afghanistan. We're getting rocketed every day. It's incredibly dangerous. We're calling in strikes. We're killing Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And I got to go to Kabul Station is calling me because they're probably pissed that I'm being too aggressive. True story. So a helo comes in and I got to kind of hop, over to coast, and from coast to finally get to Kabul. And so I leave, and my deputy was on R&R. So there's a line GS-13 case officer sitting right there. And he said, "Hey boss, you're going to be gone for 3 days. I'm going to hold down the fort. Don't worry, I won't do anything." I'm like, "Oh no, that's not what I want to hear. You're running this base. You're running everything about it. I want you to be, not hyper aggressive, but do everything that we've taught each other to do, because this is your turn to lead. You are now the acting chief of base. I'm not telling Kabul that you're the acting chief of base. I'm still in country, so there's no formal turnover. But you're running the show, and I expect you to push forward. And and his eyes are bugged out, and off I go. So you teach people the confidence to lead like that. So I talk about that story because later on we're dealing with this crazy operation where the weather's socked out. There's no ISR. We have an HVT on the X, and I talk about it in the book. And people at headquarters, I was actually not there again. I was back home, and senior officials at headquarters like, we can't do this. I'm like, no, actually we can, because I know I have people on the ground who are ready to lead.
Right.
They've been involved in this, and so let's go, let's do this thing. And a senior official actually said to me, he said, hey, if this goes south, it's your career. I was like, sure, I'm good. I got no problem with this.
Yeah.
Because we've developed our people, and we've gone through these stages of these leadership principles, and I have total confidence in my team, and it was ultimately it was a success. But I love talking about stuff like that because that's how you get to a place where you operate in the gray and you're comfortable.
It's fascinating talking to experienced leaders like yourself, because we've had so many people on this show like say those exact same things. Like Mike Perry was on, and he said, I went from thinking that a soldier was a 5-year investment or a 10-year investment to a lifetime investment. That and that the really effective leaders such as yourself are really about empowering their and that's, I don't know if it's that's easy for a lot of leaders to do, because I think that sometimes
especially nowadays,
that their juniors will steal the spotlight, or that their juniors,
or they'll fuck it up, and it's all on you.
It'll reflect on me, or
So let me get there's a principle I always talk about. I call it and all in my book is talking about dealing with adversity and humility. And so so this is not a book about someone who's thumping their chest that we're going to charge the hill. Right. I always joke with my friends who are SEALs, and they get really pissed at me. I was like, hey, when you go through BUDS training, don't you get a book deal? They get really pissed when I say that, and they'll probably be mad at me now when they hear this. But my book is about humility and dealing with adversity. And one of the principles I talk about is, I call is, humility is best served warm. And I'll give you a great example on this, and because it's about taking responsibility and taking accountability. So I was running a unit. It was back at headquarters, but it was a unit that was designed to take our enemy off the battlefield and just kind of leave it at that. And we had an errant strike, and some civilians were hurt, and that's really bad. And so so it's everything you see in the media about the CIA and the U.S. CIA in particular, about kind of civilian collateral, like that happens, but we do everything possible. Mm-hmm. We cannot go through with any kind of kinetic activity without kind of almost a zero certainty for zero collateral call. And obviously that some things go awry. So we made a mistake. Something happened. And we sat there, we kind of did a quick after action. I went up to our 7th floor, and I talk about it in the book. And I go in a room, and it's the director of the CIA, the deputy director, the 40 leaders of the agency. And they're like, what happened? The White House is pissed. Something went wrong in the strike. And I went in there, but it was very deliberate. And I said, this is my fault. I run this unit. These are the 3 things that went wrong, and we fixed it. These are the 3 things that we've done to fix this. Any questions? And it went on a little longer than that, but ultimately there was no questions. And I walked out, and there was a very senior paramilitary officer, who's kind of a legend in the place. I can't say his name, but he comes up to me and he says, hey, that was great. And I said, shit, am I going to get fired from this? He's like, no, there was no questions. I said, why? I said, you took responsibility, you protected your people, and you fixed things. Mm-hmm. And so when I went back down to kind of our little unit, they're expecting me to kind of, start saying everyone's fired. No, I said, I got your back. And so, but that kind of stuff is really important, because so what does it do? So my superiors are like, all right, Mark fucked up, but he took responsibility. There was no doubt about it. I said, this is on me. Mm-hmm. Done. The people who work for me are like, hey, we fucked up, but Mark has our back. Mm-hmm. And then we make the changes, because, mistakes happen all the time. There is no such thing as kind of, zero fail operations. And so I love talking about that. And then, but as we as CIA officers, particularly in the counterterrorism field, a lot of times we have some great successes. And so you can't really walk around thinking, your shit don't stink. You got to have that sense of humility, because Murphy's going to bite you at some point. Yeah. But I love talking about that principle. So I built a team like that. And then so later on, when the shit hits the fan and people are like, what's happening here? What's going on? We don't have the situational awareness. I'm like, my guys and gals are good.
Yeah, they got it.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that I talk about. And I think, look, the one someone told me something, a great piece of advice. They said, don't write this book for your friends, from the agency or from JSOC. Like, you have to write this book from a librarian who's reading this.
Right.
They have to identify with this, and so that's what I tried to do, and try to make it kind of real. But the biggest part about it is just, like, life is hard. Like, I failed a lot. I was, and I was a really good officer of the CIA, but man, it's like playing baseball. You hit 300. That means you make it. 7 out of 10 times you're making an out.
Right. Yeah.
Mark, Jim has an interesting question, I think, for you. He wants to know about your opinion of the conviction of John Kiriakou. Did he deserve to go to prison? A fellow Greek American, served in the Central Intelligence Agency. And if you could explain a little bit about what happened to him, for people who don't know, that he went to prison.
So, look, I think, so I knew John in the past, actually way before, when he got kind of jammed up. And I think, what John, apparently what he did incorrectly was kind of, talk out of school. And so, you sign a secrecy agreement with the agency. And look, everything I'm talking about right now in the book was cleared by the agency's publication review board, which is incredible because they clear a ton. My book is chock full of operational stories, but all of it has been cleared. I think John went a little too far, and did some things that he probably should not have. And it was at a time where, where I believe it was even under the Obama administration, where, they were going after folks who kind of divulged classified information. So he got jammed up. I knew John a long time ago. I have not talked to him since. I will tell you, just kind of as an aside, I went back to Greece right before the pandemic. I gave a speech at this, I was in the private sector, obviously, and I gave a speech at some keynote speech at some Greek security conference. And boy, did the Greeks know every single Greek American CIA officer. Like, they will talk to you about everybody. I was treated like this conquering hero. It was really embarrassing. I was worried like 17 November was going to come back and kill me.
Representing the empire.
Kind of anarchist group. But like, John Kiriakou is he obviously served time in prison. But it's clear that he said some things that he should not have, and he probably regrets that to this day.
Yeah, I would like to have John on the show, actually, to tell you the truth. I think like his qualms were, he had some moral objections to enhanced interrogation, and maybe he said some things that were inappropriate, not for me to say, but ended up he did the time, manned up to that.
And so, what I will say though on this, and actually it is important, is there are other outlets, and so for example. So I went public with my with the issues I had with the agency, and trust me, and that was a different administration. So I had heard a lot of things kind of behind the scenes that they were trying to come after me with stuff. But in essence, I didn't violate my secrecy agreement. But what I have done is I spent a lot of time on the Hill with HPSI, with the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. We call it HPSI and SISI. Those are the oversight bodies. Fully read into everything, into classified. They have all the read-ins, so I can talk to them about classified information. That's the right avenue. That's the avenue I chose. And so while the agency now probably is not thrilled that I do this, it's a hell of a lot better than kind of talking in public about things. And so there are channels that one can use. Right, and that's what I have elected to do, to try to kind of stay sound and abide by my secrecy agreement.
Right, Mark, could you talk to us a little bit more in depth about the so-called Greek Mafia at the CIA? that there's a group of you guys up there.
Okay, so one of the amazing things. So look, there's so much I could talk about. So first of all, let me just say, overall, being a Greek American has been enormously helpful to me. Nothing to do with kind of the mafia that D thinks exists. But it's more so. So look, I was a case officer in the Near East, and so the Greeks and the Arabs were always really close. And so what I was able to do was, it was pretty remarkable. So when I went and served overseas, I'm an American official, but I have this Greek last name, and the Arabs kind of gravitated towards me because they're like, okay, you might be with the U.S. government, but you're really one of us. So it was a huge advantage, and so I kind of throw that out there. Plus, they drink arak and we drink ouzo.
Yeah.
So same thing. Okay, as far as the Greek, there's a long line of Greek officials in the agency, and George Tenet, I think, is the most famous. I think his dad owned a diner in Queens. There's Gus Avracados. Gus Avracados is this famous figure. If you see the movie Charlie Wilson's War, he was one of the individuals who kind of helped kind of run and create the Afghan program to fund the Mujahideen. And so there's always this kind of funny lore of Greek Americans. But I'm going to tell you a great story on this. And this is awesome because it goes back and everything plugs my book now. Sorry. You plug this kind of the Manscaped stuff. I'm plugging my book.
Do it.
And so one of my principles I call family values. And again, obviously a very common theme, but here's what it means to me. It means that you have to build teams that have a lot of love and respect and care for each other, because that really matters when times are tough. So I'll tell you this story, and it has to do with Greeks. And I think I told this to Dee as well. So I came back from Iraq, and it was, this was probably, and like everything else in life, there's whether it's military, special operations, or intelligence, there's an award ceremony. So I got a really big award. I was lucky to receive the Distinguished Intelligence Medal. It's the agency's second highest award. And I came back. So my dad is Greek. He's not a Greek, and he's Greek American, but he's a Greek. He's solid Greek, and he remembers the days of the Greek junta, where there was a lot of abuses that happened with the right-wing government in Greece. Frankly, aided by the United States government and the CIA. So he's hated my career choice forever. But I'm getting this big intelligence medal in probably late 2003. And so he's invited. I invite my dad to the ceremony, but of course I know George Tenet because all the Greeks at CIA know each other, and he's the CIA director. So I go to George and I say, look, can you take my dad aside and talk to him? And so we're at the ceremony, and I see George take my dad aside, and they're speaking Greek together for like 15 minutes. And I come back, and my dad has tears in his eyes. And I said, what did the director say? He goes, nothing. Nothing. Tipota, nothing. That's what he says. And then I see, a couple of days later, I asked George Tenet, I said, what did you tell my dad? And he said, I told him you were a hero. And then he walked off, and I'm all choked up. And so I say this in terms of family values. So whatever you think of George Tenet, and he, and of course the WMD issue is always going to haunt him, but he got it. He understood that. And so how can I not have this affinity for an organization that does that for me? He knew my dad hated the CIA.
Right.
And my dad to this day, and if he watches this or he reads the book, because the story's in it, it'll be like, I don't like the CIA. It's not very good. Very bad organization. But ultimately, what George Tenet did for me really was meaningful.
Right.
And because he did it, it was personal. So, I love that story. And but my father, to this day says, don't think it changed my mind on your organization.
Right. That's funny.
He's 83 years old now, and so it's still so one of the funny stories, and Dee will like this. I was in Greece with him last year. It was a father-son trip. We went down to a place called Exarchia. Exarchia in Athens is the place where the Polytechnic was located. That was where 17 November was born, and so I went down there with him, and I walked the streets of him, with him there, and he's like, "We're gonna get killed here. You're a CIA officer." But it never happened. And so, we're doing okay.
Yeah. We actually had a Love Star. Thank you very much for the very generous donation. Sorry that our moderator accidentally deleted it. He said, and I think he's asking both of you this, the smart guys in the room, did the fundamental cultural divide make the traditional Western material analysis null? Cue Adam Curtis music.
That's a tough question to answer.
Okay, Jack. Okay,
I missed that. Sorry.
Here's all right. Actually, Love Star repost it for Jack, and please chime in also. America is powerful. Why wouldn't you invade us? That's in quotes. How did your lived experiences in war relate to the political education you received at home?
I think what he's talking about is I had the Iraqi partner force I worked with in Iraq made that comment to me once.
Oh, okay.
And he's when the subject of the 2003 invasion came up, and I said something to them like, maybe it wasn't the best decision we ever made, but we're here now, and we got to make the best of it, work together, that kind of thing. And I'll never forget this. He remarked to me, this was the leader of the Iraqi SWAT team. He said, well, you're a powerful country. Why wouldn't you invade us? And it's just the disparity between like how we see it as Americans and how they see it. That like we have this sort of like touchy-feely kind of like we go and do all of these horrible things, but then we feel bad about it afterwards. We're like, we kind of like look inward. There's all this navel gazing that happens. Like, yeah, we did that, but we hate ourselves for it. But we're gonna do it again anyway because fuck it. It's we're a global power. Whereas the Iraqis, or at least that Iraqi that I knew, had this perception of like, look, the strong conquers the weak. This is the way of the world. This is how it works. And I'm not saying that's right and that America made the right decision or that like might makes right. But the disparity between the two worldviews was just incredible to hear. And it was also interesting that I thought that many Iraqis supported the invasion. And and us getting rid of Saddam, they didn't have a problem with that. They hated Saddam. They were like maybe like 80% of them were like, that was great, you got rid of him. But now the question remains, why the hell are you still here? Like, what are you doing in our country? So it was just interesting that the sort of internal conversations we have in the United States about how we look at these conflicts are not the same internal conversations that are happening in these countries that we have invaded. And I just thought that was fascinating.
That is really interesting. Well, look, I mean, I spent the majority of my career in the Middle East, and of course, look, this is not to disparage the Arabs. I fell in love with the region. I mean, I did so, when I was a kid, and I ended up, my whole career was there and dedicated to kind of understanding it and dealing with the Arab world. But they have not been brought up with the same kind of values and norms that we have in terms of democracy.
No,
and that's okay.
And power.
So you just have to kind of understand that and acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a great story about it. It's a bit similar because it has to do with Iraq. And I wrote a piece a while back in the Examiner. There was a guy by the name of Charlie Seidel. Charlie Seidel was our chief of station in Baghdad during the invasion. And I call him the last great American Arabist because he really was the last great CIA officer who understood the Arab world. He spoke beautiful Arabic. His dad was a CIA officer. He went to high school in Iran. He grew up in Pakistan, in Egypt. He went to high in Beirut as well, and he spoke beautiful Arabic. And he was my chief of station in numerous places, but he was there in Baghdad at the time, and he was beloved in the Arab world. I mean, here's someone who was a gentle figure. Understood the Arabs, but he also understood kind of the power and the might of America. And I was with him, and I've thought deeply about kind of what happened in Iraq. And there's something in me to write a book or a screenplay, somewhere down the line. But I'll never forget because we were there when, if you remember, Paul Bremer first arrived on scene. Paul Bremer was the what was it called? The Coalition Provincial of the CPA.
Like the envoy, yeah.
He was the grand Viceroy, whatever.
The vizier.
And so he arrives there. And meanwhile, what Charlie and I had been doing, Charlie and I had been meeting under the table in Baghdad with senior Iraqi officials saying, we got you. Like, we want to get rid of Saddam. But we're not going to get rid of the whole government. We understand that. There are certainly people here who are war criminals, Saddam and Uday and Qusay and others, the DECA 55, for example. But the Deputy Minister of Health, come on. We need you. We need the technocrats for a future Iraqi government. And we had that place wired. And Paul Bremer flew in and basically told Charlie to pound sand, that we were going to fire the entire Iraqi military. We're going to we're going to do this debathification, which in essence means we're going to destroy the entire Iraqi technocratic class in government.
Right.
And I remember the look of horror on Charlie's face, saying, "We've lost." And that's in May. That's in May of 2003, where we in the CIA said the U.S. government just made a catastrophic error because it didn't have to go this way. And so people make mistakes. Countries make mistakes, and over the years, sometimes good intentions, but boy, that was something that I think will never live down. And there's a story in that somewhere, because a lot of us in the agency who knew Iraq. I had worked Iraq operations for a long time. Charlie, my boss. I mean, he'd been in Iraq in 1990.
Yeah.
During the when Saddam invaded Kuwait, and so a lot of us were not listened to, and
but Bremer knew what he was doing. He's wearing desert boots with a suit. I mean, a man like that is
and he rolls
keen on.
He rolls into the country and tells someone like Charlie that you're describing, who speaks perfect Arabic, who's lived around Arabs his entire life, just tells the guy to fuck off.
Right.
That's exactly what happened, and Charlie was devastated by that. And look what's happened after that. And so this is not to kind of debate the whole kind of WMD intelligence community fiasco. But I'm one of those who think that Iraq didn't have to end the way it did, despite the WMD mess. That we could have actually gotten out of there much quicker and done things a lot differently. And it just I think George W. Bush, who for all intents and purposes is a really good person. There were some terrible decisions made.
Yeah.
That even affect us to this day.
I mean, even prior to the whole de-Baathification, if they would have just leafleted all these areas and told the soldiers remain in place, we're taking over your payroll.
Right.
Like, you still have a job. Just stay where you are. Put down your weapons. We're gonna drive by you, but you still have jobs. Then you wouldn't have had all those disaffected people with no money.
Yeah,
turn into these.
You worked for Saddam. Now you're going to work for America Light.
Yeah,
no worries.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw the show into a little tailspin now. Let's move to Afghanistan with the same issue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So here I am in eastern Afghanistan in 2011. I'm sorry, 2011. And I'm talking to someone who's helping us, and he's someone, it's a local tribal chief in eastern Afghanistan. And I said, tell me about yourself. And he said, well, I was part of the Mujahideen against the Soviet invasion. But then, I'm sorry. He said, I was a communist under Najibullah. Remember the old Najibullah, the Soviet-backed ruler of Afghanistan, communist. And then it wasn't going so well, so I switched to the Mujahideen. This is a senior tribal sheikh. And then the Muj were there, and then the Taliban took over, and it was kind of chaotic. But then you guys came, so I'm switching over to you right now. And so I said to him, I said, "What are you going to do when we leave?" He goes, "I'll switch right to the Taliban." Right?
Yeah.
All politics is local.
Yep. Andrew says, fun fact, flaccid is one of the most commonly mispronounced words in the English language. The correct pronunciation is flaccid. Listen, Andrew, no one likes a smartass, all right? Metalhead says, I've got the whole Manscaped set at home. They're great. Jameson says, okay, here we go. Can you mention how Delta integrates into CIA?
So I think that, ultimately JSOC and CIA it's a really interesting relationship, and I've written a lot about this. And so it's a relationship that was not born. It's been going on for a long time, but certainly has flourished after 9/11. And so what has happened, and one of the things that I find most interesting, as I know my friends from SEAL Team 6 or Delta or the other units we're not supposed to talk about, but we can tonight on this show. But ultimately, these were individuals that I met, probably in Afghanistan or around the Afghan CT fight. And then it went to Iraq, and then it went to Yemen, and then it went to, so 20 years later, we've all grown up together. So there is an incredible synergy between the Joint Special Operations Command and the agency. And because ultimately the agency is designed to kind of feed intelligence for the CT mission, and the direct action elements, lie in JSOC. And so it's a relationship that I think has been, pretty extraordinary. Everyone wants to hear that the relationship is terrible, and I actually, to the contrary, I have great friends from Army and Navy, and also Air Force, special operations units, and as kind of the years went by, you have a lot of trust together. So I'll give you a perfect example. I remember a time, I got to be careful in saying this. There was a bad JSOC strike in the Middle East, and a lot of kind of recriminations. But you know what? We managed through this because we all knew each other, and we got through it because there's personal relationships that have been formed. And so it's two organizations. Whether you say Delta, when I say Delta, it's the same thing as SEAL Team 6 or or it's basically JSOC altogether, whether it's the Rangers or First Recon Marines or whatever. But we've kind of grown up together and we're kind of attached at the hip. And the fact of the matter is they we work very well together, and these are my kind of brothers and sisters in arms, and I will always think of them in that fashion.
I'm just curious, did you ever run into like conflicts because you have organization like JSOC that normally works sort of tactical ground game? That's a broad generalization I'm making, but an organization that deals on the tactical level, whereas the CIA traditionally is working to collect strategic intelligence. Does that ever conflict with one another?
I think that, for me, the answer was no, because ultimately, because our coordination or our time on the ground together with JSOC is going to be more in a tactical environment. I think what's really interesting, and maybe we pivot to this now, is so where do JSOC and the CIA move now into a more strategic situation, which is I was corrected the other day. I was calling it the near peer environment. But this is when we're talking about how do JSOC and the CIA work together to against China and Russia, frankly, which we call near peer, or there's been a different name change. And so that to me is really interesting. But the way and I've written quite a lot about this, because ultimately I think that the U.S. government got really good at manhunting. So there's no better organization in the world, and it's the intelligence community, the CIA, combined with the JSOC elements, where we can ultimately put on the X just about anybody around the world. It's not a question of if we can do it; it's should we can do it. Should we do it? And there's so many examples. The Soleimani strike is a perfect example of our ability to do this. And so, but now what do we do when it comes to Russian intelligence officers, Chinese intelligence officers, Chinese or Russian, malign influence, covert influence efforts? And I think that it's a really interesting subject to talk about, how the CIA and JSOC kind of partner together against that. And I know both of you have commented in social media and Twitter, one way or the other on this. But yeah. That's the new game right now.
I recommend direct energy weapons personally.
Well, yeah,
I'm right with you, Dave. I'll be there.
But how do you see that, Mark? How do you see both JSOC and the CIA in that liaison relationship shifting gears to go from counterterrorism, hunting down bad guys, catching them in their beds, to now going and fucking with some powerful countries, they're global powers, like it or not.
Cold Wars almost.
Yeah.
Right. So here's what I kind of espoused before I retired in July of 19, and I wrote about recently, and I think in some of my columns, and it got a lot of positive feedback, and then some blowback too. But ultimately, okay, if we're really good at manhunting, and this has to do with obviously Al Qaeda, the Taliban, Hezbollah, you name it. What do we want to do in kind of more established countries? Okay, let's say it's Europe. Well, we want to find out. We want to track the activities of the Russian GRU and SVR officers, or the Chinese MSS officers. And so, can the agency, in partnering with JSOC, do that? So it's going to be a little different. So we're not doing it to put them on the X, but I see no reason. I see no reason why we can't ask our JSOC, brothers and sisters, if they're trained correctly, and it has a lot to do with training. But can we put them on the street to help us develop what we call pattern of life? Ultimately to determine what a Russian GRU or a Chinese MSS officer is doing in XYZ country, and that's really important, because either we're going to try to kind of shut them down operationally, or maybe we're going to try a recruitment pitch.
Right.
But why not use those capabilities that we've developed with JSOC, because they know how to do this. And that was kind of my pitch when I was in government, and it's been kind of what I espoused afterwards. Now, there's a lot more that JSOC has to do, but I think in this niche, I think they can really help. They're going to look a little different. So I remember going to kind of units in JSOC that do this, and I'm like, okay, the white guy with tattoos, on their arms, is that you, Dave, right there, or Jack? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I can't use you right now.
Right.
But you know what? But there are JSOC elements that do have, people with different ethnic backgrounds. There's female officers. And so can we use you for manhunting on the street to find out the pattern of life of a hostile intelligence officer. And I would argue that you can. Now, the mindset is going to be a little different for JSOC. And I would always caution my JSOC colleagues, is like, okay, everyone loves Zero Dark 30. Like, you guys killed bin Laden. You guys are rock stars. Guess what? You might actually never know what happens. So you're going to have that maturity to say, okay, we've given the CIA a target package. We followed this Russian intelligence officer for 6 weeks in XYZ country. Off to you.
Right.
Guess what? It's the CIA. For compartmentation reasons, we might not tell you.
Right.
And you have to have the maturity. And so, that's kind of my paradigm on this. I think it can be done. I hope it's being done right now.
Outside of just even like the ethnic considerations or skin color considerations, I think one of the other challenges you run in with JSOC, with any elements, is you put 3 or 4 JSOC operators, doesn't matter what their color is, particularly males, on the street. You've got 3 yoked dudes walking around that, you know what I mean, that draw attention,
and I think that's what he's saying, like those yoked dudes that have like the nautical star tattoo on the neck, like they're not going to be. Even without the tattoos, I mean, it's not often that you see people at that level of fitness out in public in general, but then you see 3 or 4 of them, and it's like, was today like National Fitness Day, or like what's going on? Is there,
no, but so then you need, selection has to maybe change a bit,
right,
on some of these units.
How many Oreos can
or you can wear disguise, or look, there are ways you can kind of like maybe you're not wearing your your Oakleys and your 501 cargo pants. And your Solomon sneakers, which is the fucking exact profile of every JSOC person I've ever met.
All right, listen, Mark. I resemble some of these comments.
You wearing Solomon's right now? Yes, you are. Yeah.
Merrill's actually.
Merrill, same thing, right?
Well, I was watching a hearing not so long ago where General Nagata, who he served in a special mission unit, served in the special operations community. He's retired now. He was saying that this is absolutely true. However, we also want to maintain our counterterrorism capabilities because, as we saw during the years of the Soviet Union and even to today, we're also going to see state-sponsored terrorism that, as we try to confront Russia and China, it's a possibility, they may wage war beneath the nuclear threshold by sponsoring terrorist organizations.
Yeah. So that's right. And I think that, so we can't take our eye off the ball. Like, there's so much on our plate. We have Russian malign influence. China is clearly the existential threat. I think one of the most interesting things is that between the Trump administration and the Biden administration, there's actually agreement that China is the core threat of our time.
Yeah, it is.
But we can't take our eye off the CT ball, and so, this was my bailiwick for most of my career, was counterterrorism. It's what I love. But you're right. So I, you worry that you don't want those, that critical capability to atrophy in any way.
Right.
So you still have to have those units that do that. And maybe it's a good time to kind of jump into kind of the discussion on the Afghan withdrawal. So, that's one of the things that I'm actually really concerned about, because ultimately, I just personally, I don't see the reason why we have to go to zero there. Not having a residual force of about 2,500, where you still can have CIA intelligence assets and officers on the ground, and a residual kind of CT force. I think that we've taken that critical element of humans away with a full withdrawal, and I'll tell you, I think we're gonna see some really grim videos, grim stuff on TV about the collapse of Afghanistan. It's going to be really hard for a lot of us, because look, 2,500 to me, and this is nothing. This is not something that should be even up for debate. I don't understand why we have to go down to zero.
So you think there should be like a residual counterterrorism force left behind in the country?
Absolutely. Sure. And so that would include, agency officers and paramilitary officers, and also JSOC. 100%. If you look at it, we have no other allies in the region. If you think, I always talked about Pakistan as the ally from hell. I sat on eastern Afghanistan and kind of fought against the Taliban and Al Qaeda, aided by elements of the Pakistani military. Pakistan is not our friend. If you think the stands, all kind of this, the old Russian satellites, which are their own countries now, but if you think that Vladimir Putin's not going to put pressure on them to say no to kind of U.S. basing, maybe we can fly kind of MQ-9s from the Gulf states, and I think that's one of the plans that I've seen in the press. But ultimately, a full pullout out of Afghanistan is just, for me and a lot of people, in kind of my world, at the CIA, it just doesn't make sense, because we're not talking about 50,000 or 100,000 troops. We're talking about a tiny residual force. It's the concept of defend forward. And I don't and you can actually say we've withdrawn from Afghanistan and it's over, and still have that force of 2,500 there or whatever it is to keep some assets in place. And so I don't understand it. I was very upset when President Trump advocated this, and I'm even more upset that Biden has jumped onto it. And then you see press reports now where Secretary of Defense and others they say we're thinking about options on on how to do kind of over the horizon options. Yeah. That's stuff that should have been pre-cooked already,
years ago.
It's crazy. We're way ahead of the what do you say? You're pushing the cart above the horse here, or whatever. I'm getting that analogy wrong.
So you're not really looking at maintaining forces in Afghanistan necessarily for maintaining a stable Afghanistan,
routine
or
ops,
continuing the war on Afghanistan, but more of a satellite or a platform in that region, because we don't have other platforms in that. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And because again, I go back to the paper I wrote when I first came on as an analyst in 1993, and if I have any credibility, it's going back to there, which talked about the Afghan Arabs, but the whole point was we abandoned Afghanistan after we defeated the Soviets there, and empty spaces and ungoverned spaces, which is about to happen there, is a breeding ground for terrorism. And so I don't think what I'm advocating is anything radical. And look, I believe we should not be fighting in Afghanistan anymore, but that doesn't mean we can't have a small residual force. And so, I have a lot of friends who I think in the intelligence community who really feel strongly about this in the same way, because what I think you're going to see is scenes of what we saw in Saigon with embassy evacuations. I mean, I don't fundamentally understand how the U.S. embassy in Kabul or any Western embassy will remain there. I just don't see it. I think you're going to see some pretty gruesome images, and I don't understand why the Biden administration, who was really critical of that Trump, kind of decision to just get out.
Yeah.
Why we couldn't have left just a small force there? I don't get it. Or the United States has a policy historically of what I call defend forward. That's putting U.S. troops forward. It doesn't mean 100,000 U.S. troops. But it certainly doesn't mean it certainly shouldn't be down to zero.
So
I don't get this.
Would they continue combat ops in Afghanistan, or are they more there? I'm just trying to grasp.
I think you continue. So there's obviously the CT elements that are there, but certainly you can aid the Afghan government in pushing back against the Taliban. But you have to be on the ground there.
Yeah.
There's no way we do this. Especially if the embassy collapses, and it's going to. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to see, some pretty gruesome images of our withdrawal from the embassy.
I mean, in my opinion, for whatever that may or may not be worth, I think that before all is said and done, that we'll see something like that, a battalion-sized element left behind in Afghanistan. I think that our government will cave at some point. Maybe I'm wrong.
Right?
Maybe I'm wrong, but
Jack. I mean, because it doesn't make sense in any way not to have that.
And when the television images come where we're back to, or not us, but the Taliban is back to cutting women's throats in soccer stadiums, there's going to be a certain pushback to that, in my opinion.
Yeah. And so I don't understand this, and it seems to be there's almost sometimes a knee-jerk reaction that we have to go to zero, but I don't think what people understand what zero really means. I did my book signing. I did my book launch the other day, which was you do this at an indie Jack, you might remember this. You at your local bookstore, and your friends and family come, and a whole bunch of my teammates from Afghanistan came.
That's
so cool. I hadn't seen them for years. This was freaking awesome. And in fact, talking about my leadership book, I'm going to give another plug here. One of my guys from Afghanistan came and told my son, there you go. And he goes, "Hey, Mark was the best leader we ever had." And of course, I was busy signing books and I missed it. And what an idiot. And I wrote him a note later on. But one of the things that every single one of my teammates talked about was the Afghan indige and the interpreters, and the utter horror that we kind of were all feeling about this. And I'll tell you something, as a CIA operations officer, I learned Arabic, but you know what? I didn't know Dari or Pashto, and I had a Turk with me every time I went in for any agent meeting. Every time we kind of rolled outside the wire, and I had to kind of try to play badass and roll out with the ground branch guys. And so when I went out on patrols with them, we had Afghan Turks with us. The fact that these guys might be in peril, that causes me to lose sleep at night. That's horrible. And so that's I'm really worried what we're going to see in the next couple, kind of weeks and months.
Mitch says, I arrived late, so I may have missed it. Is Mark talking about the kind of thing like the Havana syndrome? Yeah, that's what he's talking about. If you go back, you'll see it. Jim B says, can Mark touch on the career progression issues that headquarters-based officers may face within the Directorate of Operations? Thank you. I enjoyed the book.
Oh, well, first, thank you that you enjoyed the book. That makes me happy. So, look, the one of the things that I talk about in the book. So first of all, there's all different kinds of CIA officers. So obviously, you have field operations officers. You can have paramilitary officers, and there's a ton of officers who stay back at headquarters, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you do that for a variety of reasons. But one of my principles in the book is called the glue guy, and I can say the glue guy, glue gal as well. But my principle of the glue guy is, there are always indispensable members of the team. And even a high-performing kind of elite team that are going to be in the shadows, that are going to be in the background. And as a leader, you really have to take care of them. And so, so whether, let's say we take, the CIA conducts an operation, if we kill bin Laden or we capture an HVT or anything like that, always those on the front, the tip of the spear are going to be rewarded. But as a leader, you have to kind of sit back and always say, okay, who else, participated in this? And so, that's one of the things that I learned, and so what I would always talk about, our headquarters operations, our headquarters officers supporting operations, or the analysts or anyone else. This is a team sport, in a huge way, and everybody has to be rewarded. And I'll give you kind of a really silly example. So we're in Eastern Afghanistan. We run an operation. We actually put a Taliban member on the X, and they are no longer with us. I call an all hands meeting in our skiff, in our secure facility. I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. We're going out to the fire pit, and I get our cooks. Our cook was from Macedonia. I don't even fucking know his name, but I know he cooks good food. I'm like, get the cook, get the support guy, get all these people out here, and we're gonna all come together. And I sat there and I told them what we had done, and people, and I remember my deputy's like, hey man, they're not cleared for that. I'm like, I don't care. We just took a bad guy off the battlefield, and that cook is the reason why the GB guys could go out on patrol. That cook is why you're not kind of shitting in the corner.
Right.
We're in Eastern Afghanistan. And so everybody has to be celebrated. And so that's kind of a key principle of mine. So, look, the CIA is a forward-leaning organization. We are an overseas organization, but our headquarters personnel, and they're not necessarily support personnel. They could be analysts. They could be targeters. They're just as important. So you kind of have to celebrate them all the time. And that's one of the leadership principles that it took me a while to get to, but I really celebrated at the end of my career.
Jake has kind of a very specific question here. He says, hi, Mark. I'm an Arabian Peninsula analyst, and I'm having a hard time being an effective analyst. There isn't much going on in the area. What can I do?
I don't even know. I don't know. You have, if you're in the Arabian Peninsula, you have Yemen, which is kind of a mess. You have Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, who likes to kill American journalists, and is probably bipolar and a little psychotic. I don't know. It seems to me
there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. I mean,
the Arabian, to me, it was really interesting. I served in that area of the world at one point, and it's a region which is fascinating because for a long time it was not as important, but then under the Trump administration, clearly they pivoted towards that, and Trump had this fascination with the Saudi, with obviously with Saudi. Jared Kushner spent a lot of time going there. But ultimately, if you look at the Arabian Peninsula, there is one country there that is kind of a success story, and that's the UAE. The United Arab Emirates is, I don't know if either of you guys have been there, but it's pretty extreme. You go to Dubai, you're kind of taken aback at what they've done. And so it's a pretty amazing place. And then, right in front of them is the threat of Iran. So I don't know. I think a lot's going on. On in the Gulf. And,
you got a shooting war going on in Yemen. You got Oman there, and some stuff going just beneath the surface. If you scratch hard enough, there's smuggling going on across the Gulf of Aden.
There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Andrew says, "How does Mark feel about John Kiriakou hosting a gig with Radio Sputnik?"
Yeah, so I don't like that. That's not good. So I'm going to be honest, and so so I don't know if John is kind of needs employment or not, but and I'll say this, and I'm not going to denigrate another former agency officer. I will say though that there are media outlets which are obviously sponsored and controlled by the Russian government, whether it's Russia Today, RT, or Sputnik, and to me those are arms of the Russian government, and so I'm not a really big fan of them. They are dissemination mechanisms for Russian propaganda. It's pretty obvious, and so I'm not a giant fan. I would not, if they asked me to come on, and trust me, if I'm trying to sell my book all over the place. I'll go on left-wing radio, right-wing radio. I don't care. I'm not going on.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mark. And this is getting a little bit down in the weeds. But I've noticed a phenomena where we have American citizens who are U.S. government employees. They get into some kind of trouble. Maybe they become whistleblowers. Maybe they get in trouble with Department of Justice. They do some time. Maybe they don't. But they become, for one reason or another, ostracized, and it seems like they end up running into the hands of the likes of RT and Sputnik and some of the Iranian press, like Press TV.
Right.
How do you think we should handle that? Do you think that even the guys who get into trouble, that there should be some sort of reconciliation process to bring them back into the fold so that they don't run off to these foreign press?
Jack, I love this question, and I'll tell you something, and I'll tell you why I love this. And it's actually something I will admit to you that I have actually discussed with our director, with Bill Burns, because I think there is a really bad tendency of agency officers, when they retire, either sometimes they're disgruntled, or something's happened to them, but something goes wrong. It doesn't happen in the U.S. military like this, but it's for some reason it happens at the agency, and so there's got to be a better way that we kind of embrace the formers. That's what That's what kind of.
I mean,
essence everyone has called it are the formers, and so that the worst thing possible is for them to do what you just what you just talked about. So there's got to be a way to embrace them more. For some reason, when people leave the agencies, so many people, even at the senior levels, are unhappy, and there's something wrong with that, and we kind of got to get to the bottom of that, and we have to kind of bring them back into the fold, embrace them more. For a long time after I went public, I was ostracized. People did not like the fact that I went public begging for healthcare, but I think Director Burns has been really smart about this and kind of brought me back into the fold, as have others, and so there's nothing good that happens in talking to an RT or a Sputnik ever.
Right.
Period.
Right.
That's in the times where I was fighting with the agency for healthcare, that never even crossed my mind in a millisecond. That to me is going to the enemy. Period.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I also think that if people are looking for employment or money, and these other, those are the only outlets that they think they can get, that some people, that's what they might choose. And with it being more like intelligence people than military, it could be that those people are just more valued by those agencies, have more opportunities with those agencies than say, somebody from the military would. Because there's a mystique obviously.
I mean, I can tell you, I've definitely gotten invited on RT many times, invited on Press TV, all those outlets before, and thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it's like working for the enemy, but I mean,
no. If you wanted to go on there and tell them that that Vladimir Putin is is
a dick
individual, look, I think that it cannot be an outlet. It can't be the last resort for people. And so, simply for a counterintelligence perspective, if you go to a place like Sputnik or RT, that isn't, to me, that's an organ of Russian intelligence.
Right.
And that's a place you don't want to be.
Right.
This period. So
it's also part of the overall propaganda battle, right? I mean, it's not just intelligence, but it's also, hey, look, RT has this former CIA officer.
And they want to have, and I know other reporters too who have been, invited on there. They want to have someone like me on there because I sometimes write and I say things that are critical of the United States government, but that comes from a place of, I just want us to be better. I'm not sure as hell not involved in going over to the other side and trying to.
No, Jack, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
So it's so funny you say that because that is the essence of being an American, of being a of being a existing in a democracy, of being a patriot. Of course, you can criticize your government. You have a First Amendment right to do so.
Right.
I mean, that's 100% accepted and accurate, but not with RT.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you, man.
Okay. Yeah, but your idea about sort of bringing them back into the fold, or like that, I think that is it's important because once people do feel ostracized,
it's difficult for us to do, but in my opinion, having seen what some of these guys go through, I don't agree with a lot of what they've done, but I also think that it's maybe a mistake to just leave them in the wind.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. No, you're right. And so as I think we have to look back and say, okay, how have they gotten to that place?
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so, and look, I mean, John, we're talking about John, so again, it's, so why did he feel that it was necessary to go talk to them?
Right.
When you have, I mean, I remember I was curious about this because I looked and, there's, I don't know if I'm going to get the news organization wrong, but it was a San Francisco paper, San Francisco Chronicle or something like that saying, what a patriot he was to speak out against torture. Like there are organizations in the United States that should be able to, embrace him. But to go to what I consider as the enemy.
Right.
KT asks, for those who are unaware, please ask Mark about the history of Soviet international terrorism, starting with its inventor, KGB General Alexander Sakharovsky. I don't know. Do you know anything about that, Mark? I don't know.
Well, okay. So I think that probably the best way to answer this is, if you go back to kind of the classical terrorist groups of the 1970s, the Soviet Union certainly sponsored them, whether it was the, PFLP-GC or the PFLP.
With Wadia Haddad and Abu Nidal.
The organization, right?
Yeah.
There was always a Soviet sponsor or an East German sponsor. And so, look, this was, one of the one book that I love, and it's gonna cause, people to probably fall asleep at night. But it's called the Mitrokhin Archives.
Yeah.
And it's a book that, ultimately it's a Soviet intelligence officer who defected to the Brits and brought a whole bunch of stuff with them, and they wrote a book about it. But it's super interesting because it details so much of what the Soviet Union did in terms of, their efforts against the United States, against the West, but also in the CT realm. And so, look, at the end of the day, the Soviet Union was sponsoring international terrorist movements, particularly, the Palestinian movements. And so, there's kind of a long history of that. It's documented. It's not a surprise to anybody. It was part of their great struggle against the West.
Alex asks, this is pretty specific too. Mark, can you please explain the capabilities of the CIA's maritime branch? Are they more like aquatic listening outposts or SEAL teams?
Jeez. Oh, I don't even know how to answer that. Probably better to pass on that. I mean, when you start getting into specifics, branch or maritime branch, it's probably better to pass. We have maritime capabilities. Just leave it at that.
I will take the time to just plug something I wrote that may answer a bit of his question.
I know what you're going to write. I know what you're going to say right now as well.
There's an article that I wrote that was published by Yahoo. The title is "The CIA sent a team of four operators on a spy mission targeting China, and none came back." If you go and read that article, it'll give you the gist of it.
And that's a heartbreaking article.
It is. It's fucking tragic, honestly, what happened to those four guys.
Yep.
Andrew says, I think the name is spelt wrong. I think he means Michael Schuler. Is he as crazy as he sounds?
He's talking about Mike Scheuer. So I know what he's talking about. So Mike Scheuer was a former agency analyst who then was one of the bosses of what we call Alex Station. And this was pre 9/11, in which it was a unit, mainly an analytic unit that was tracking Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda. And one of the things, kind of the sad things, is that Mike Scheuer over the years kind of has kind of degenerated a little bit, and so he's turned into a QAnon guy.
Yeah,
he was someone I knew him as an agency officer. He was a very good agency officer. He was a great analyst on Afghanistan, kind of in the 1990s. He was one of the first chiefs of Alex Station. Again, this was the unit that was designed to track UBL and Al Qaeda, but something went wrong. And so he's a kind of a full bore QAnon conspiracy theorist now. And what do you say?
How do you think that happens, Mark? And I've witnessed it also with some special operations guys. I mean, you're talking about in the case of Michael, a highly intelligent, high-performing individual. How do you think they go down that rabbit hole?
I don't know. It's this. Look, I think this is a sad case. I don't like talking about it all that much because it's someone who I liked and I thought was really brilliant for a long time, and now is truly kind of gone off the wall. I don't know. I mean, I think. Look, I live in Northern Virginia. It's a suburb that has, you might think it's pretty progressive, but I have a lot of friends who are kind of Trump supporters, and I have some friends who are kind of the kooky QAnon folks. It's hard to deal with people like that. I don't know. These are people who I really like. I have friends who are at the Capitol on January 6th, and it's really hard for me to deal with them. But you kind of making that switch. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. How you kind of go down that rabbit hole, because these were really great Americans. They're friends of mine, and took a turn for the worse. And it's look. I have no problem if someone is out talking about their First Amendment rights. They can do anything they want. But kind of the assault on the Capitol. I have friends who kind of were involved in that, and that's been very difficult for me to deal with.
Yeah, you got to draw the line somewhere, and likewise, it's super painful. And I mean, I've mentioned it before. Someone who is my direct superior in special forces was at the Capitol that day. Yeah. It's painful. It's really painful.
I don't know how you come back from that. And in fact. I'm not going to get into names, but like I have not talked to so I remember seeing a video and I was like, oh my God, he's there. And I've not talked to him since then. I don't know if I can, that to me was kind of a bridge too far. Not to say that look, half my friends are Republicans, half my friends are Trump voters. That's fine. This is going way beyond that. I live in Washington, there's Republicans and Democrats everywhere. And I mean, for God's sakes, I've decided to write a column for a conservative newspaper, even though that's not really my political bent. That's fine to me. But those who've kind of taken that step a little darker and deeper, I don't know. That's hard. I don't know how to deal with that, frankly. I'll look to you all for advice too, because I have friends who are at the Capitol. I've not talked to them since.
I'm still working on it myself, Mark. I'm afraid to say.
I mean, I'm kind of in the corner where I don't think that there was. I think people's right to protest, people's right to protest. I don't think everybody that was at the Capitol is guilty of some grand treason thing. Right. I think the people who broke in, the handful of people that broke in, were, going above and beyond. But like, I don't look at everybody who is there as having committed some great crime any more than people protesting outside the White House.
No, I'm talking about people who kind of broke in.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, and it's weird, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it because, first off, I'm not the protesting type of person for anything really. I think I'm too lazy, so I can't even put myself in the shoes of being out someplace like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know.
No, actually, I like this conversation 2 hours into it because everyone's had a couple drinks.
Yeah.
But to me, this is actually really important because, and it's important because those of us in our world, and this is your viewership or listenership, whether it's intel or spec ops or regular military or whatever, like this is our world right now, and I think everybody's struggling with this. I have great friends in the community who I think have kind of gone astray. And frankly, I don't know what to do about it. And these are people who, were great Americans, great patriots. I might have served with, but boy, it's tough.
I also have to say though that that I'm a little perturbed. I 100% do not agree with what happened at the Capitol. I 100% believe that anybody who committed a crime needs to be arrested for that crime, that we have rights under the Constitution, we have the right to peacefully assemble, all these things. And anybody who committed a crime needs to be arrested for that crime. But I'm also somewhat perturbed that nobody at all talks about the same thing happening at the White House with like 60 Secret Service agents and officers being injured, one of the guard shacks being burnt down, the gates being, breached. But
it's not accurate because lots of people have talked about
I think he froze.
A lot of it looks like Mark's
give us 1 second.
Internet
guys. Sorry
connection
about that.
may have dumped, but I mean, lots of people have talked about it. And if you go through the arrest records for Washington D.C., there were like hundreds and hundreds.
But we don't mention them in the same breath. Why don't we mention that? I mean, aren't they the same thing?
You're mentioning it right now. I mean,
I am, but aren't we talking about the same thing? We were talking about U.S. citizens. I mean, attacking government buildings. And I really want Mark to be in on this.
Yeah, he's going to have to.
Sorry, guys. Call us back. Hey, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to our channel. Hit the little bell icon to get your notifications. Also, check out on Patreon. We have a new level on Patreon now, don't we?
Yeah, we're doing a couple bonus episodes a month for people who are supporting us on Patreon. And there's also a link in the description for the merch. There's T-shirts and there's coffee mugs. And what else do we got going on?
Oh, we have our Instagram at the.teamhouse or .team.house.
Yep, it's all down in the description.
Yep. But yeah, on our Patreon, we have our normal $1 support, which will get you all of our bonus content, or we talk to our guests about, things that maybe, funny stories, body stories, just random things that maybe they didn't get a chance to tell or they didn't want to talk about. And now we have the new $5 level, which of support, which is another 2 meetings of just Jack and I shooting the shit, and Dee actually joining us. And hook some brothers up.
Peter says, Jack, can you get 2 GWAT experienced guys to debate both sides of the full pullout versus residual force in Afghanistan? That's not at all a bad show idea. Something that we can think about.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happened to Mark. Unfortunately, we've never really had the internet get the plug pulled like that before. So we're kind of like, but we were kind of starting to come to the natural end of the show. So maybe we can end it here and try to get Mark back to do the bonus segment in a moment. And no, I'm sorry, guys, that we lost Mark. Hopefully, did the Russians get him? I don't know. Is there the SWAT team come and hit his house and they balled him up and they're carrying him off right now? We don't know. Oh, there he
we
is.
go.
Hey, Mark, how you doing, man?
We
I don't
see
know what happened there.
we see your tech support just left.
What just happened?
We were wondering if the Russians came and got you, or or maybe the Department of Justice blew in your door and they were hauling you off.
I just said I don't know. My everything went crazy, and we synced in with my iPhone. So sorry about that.
Okay, no, thank you, Mark. I appreciate you coming back.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of coming towards the natural conclusion of the show. Mark, if we could do the bonus segment with you for a few minutes, that'd be really cool.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. Mark, I was just
go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, because one of the things that perturbs me about talking about the Capitol, and again, I am not advocating anything that happened. I believe you commit a crime, you get charged for the crime. But what perturbs me about it is that people do not talk about what happened in the Capitol and what talked about the White House. Like 60 Secret Service agents and officers getting injured, a guard shack getting burned down, the gates getting breached. They don't talk about those things in the same breath. Like that people pretend as though the whole thing at the White House never happened. And I think, to be fair, we just have to say people are out of control right with this stuff. That's me, though.
Well, I don't know. I think that there's kind of an inability to have any kind of conversation in this country right now, and I think that just in my view, like I think there should be some kind of commission that kind of looks at what happened on January 6th, because it's a pretty dark day in our country. I don't particularly care how they do it, but there's got to be something, and the fact that we are unable to kind of come to a agreement between the Republicans and Democrats to actually kind of go forward and take a hard look at what happened. And it's not about the security failures of the Capitol Police. That's silly. It's got to be kind of on inherently what happened there. I think that's really important. So it's that's the times we live in. We'll see.
Yeah. So hey, everybody. I mean, check out Mark's book, Clarity in Crisis. Great leadership book, but also, I mean, just great to see the insights of somebody who's been there and done that and led in all different types of environments.
And I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. And if you liked it, go check out episode 67, the last episode we did with Mark.
Yeah.
Gets into a lot of his, kind of boots on the ground experiences.
The career and
talking about the Chapman bombing, doing HVT hits with SEAL Team 6 in Iraq. Some really interesting stuff in there. And
I'm gonna throw you guys another loop. Let me tell you a really quick story.
Do it. Yep.
Okay, so one of the really cool things I did last week, or maybe 10 days ago. So, one of the GRS officers, one of our security officers who was killed there, Jeremy Weiss, his brother is a guy by the name of Bo Weiss. Bo Weiss was a Marine, and he was deployed in Afghanistan during the time of Jeremy's death. And so him and an author, a local author here in Vienna by the name of Tom Salea, wrote a book, and it's called The Three Weiss Men, because ultimately it's an amazing story. So Bo Weiss, who was a Marine, his two older brothers, Jeremy, who worked for us in CIA, and then his older brother, Ben, who was a special forces operator, both of them were killed in action. And so it's extraordinary. This guy is a double gold star brother. Wow. That's insane.
Yeah.
And so a couple months ago, Tom Salea reached out to me and said, "Hey, this guy, my friend Bo, who I'm writing a book with, wants to come see his brother Jeremy's star on the wall at CIA headquarters." And so I arranged the whole thing. I called into the office. I talked to the director, Bill Burns, and we got him in. And so Bo Weiss, a couple days ago, maybe 10 days ago, came in. Former Marine. He's retired now. But he came in and he saw his brother's star, Jeremy, on the wall, the memorial wall of CIA headquarters. Amazing moment. And I just want to kind of throw that out there as kind of, our segment to end it, because that was pretty cool.
Had they not invited the family when they put the
they did, but look, I can't throw a dig on the Marine Corps, but Bo was deployed in Afghanistan. They didn't let him come home.
Right.
So he didn't see the memorial ceremony at CIA headquarters, and so it was neat for him to see. Neat's the wrong word. It was emotional. It was powerful for him to see his brother's star on the wall at Langley, and that was really awesome. And I tried to do so many. Obviously, as you talked about, my role in the whole operation. And so, there's a lot of things I wanted to do for Bo, but the other thing I did was I called a whole bunch of friends. I live in the DC area, and we got Bo to throw out the first pitch at the Washington Nationals game.
That's amazing.
That was so freaking cool. And he's a huge baseball fan. It was so awesome. And, I said, over the couple of days of meeting Bo and talking to him, amazing experience. And, that's the right thing to do to honor his brother.
Is that something that is challenging to organize? Like when you think of the CIA, you think of this really, spooky, shadowy organization that whatever. Is it really hard to like get a family member in there to see,
Well, no, I mean, so yes and no, but you got to remember, so the same reason why I kind of battled for healthcare and ultimately got it, I was senior, so I don't give a shit.
Right.
And so I'm like, we're going to get this dude in. Like, are you kidding me? He's never seen his brother's star on the wall.
Right.
So I start making phone calls and stuff like that, but I ain't stopping until he's there. And God bless Bill Burns, the new CIA director. And finally I got to him. And I was like, and I talked to him. I said, hey, can we get Bo to come in? And he said, of course he can.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, look, just like anything else in life, there's steps along the way, and you kind of got to push through it. And man, seeing Bo go there's a lot of stuff in the media about this, but seeing Bo go and see his brother's star on the wall and the tears in his eyes, and that was awesome. And it's the least I could do to honor his brother. And Bo's a great kid. He was the Marine Corps. But then when both of his brothers were killed, the Marines told him, you can't deploy anymore. He's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, I want to be on the front. I want to be on the tip of the spear. And they're like, you can't.
Yeah.
You're a double gold star brother. Like, we're not doing this again.
Yeah.
And so, he lives out in Oklahoma now. He's a great kid. And it was awesome meeting him.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the whole Saving Private Ryan type of thing that they're not going to take the last child of a parent's.
Nope.
Yeah.
And it blew me away just emotionally. The whole thing was crazy, but
that must have been really powerful. Yeah.
That's hardcore. Graham.
Here's the thing for you guys too. Like, you guys have a platform as well. Like, if you find something that's wrong, like, just fight it. Like, just get it done. He's like, hey, can I go see my brother's star on the wall? Like, hell yeah, we're gonna make it happen. I don't care how. And so that was awesome.
Yeah.
No, I'm all about it. I like to be very combative.
Yeah, you should be.
Personality flaw. Patrick Skinner would be a great guest on this, says Graham.
Yes, he would.
Yeah, we'll have to see what we can do there. So Mark, this has been really fun, man. Thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Yeah.
And
I love you guys. This is awesome. I love this show. I could do this for like several hours.
We do too, Mark. We love having you on, man. And we cannot wait till you are in New York and you can come in the studio.
That would be a lot of fun.
We'll get fucked up.
Next episode, next Friday, we're going to have Danny Coulson on again, who was the founding FBI agent. He founded the FBI hostage rescue team, and we're going to be talking about Waco and Ruby Ridge, that he had some ancillary involvement.
Well, he had supervisory roles in not on site, but he was directly involved with both of those in their execution.
So that's coming at you next episode, and then the next one after that, the Friday after, is episode 100, where we're going to have a little party here, have some pizza, some drinks. We're going to have like 6-7 people in here, all in the studio, and probably get drunk off our asses. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I just want to plug this again. First off, the book. And secondly, Sound Off. And I posted a link in the app. It's sound-off.com. Pass that around for people who don't know about it.
Absolutely. And tremendous resource for kind of mental health, for veterans and others. And, God bless, we have to be there for people who have served and have given so much. And, if we can do anything, it's we can honor those. So, so please, thanks for pushing that.
And Mark, we're really happy to hear that you've been getting the care that you have,
and other guys too.
It's been helping.
Thanks, guys.